Science and spirituality. The debate goes on. But really, scientists and spiritualists are both seeking the answers to the same question just in different ways. They both try to find the hidden laws of nature, the higher power that created everything, and use their discoveries to better the life of others. And with this interview series, we have tried to learn more about the intersection of science and spirituality with our guest, who is very unique in being both a neurologist and a long standing meditation practitioner. So, what better way than to talk to him and find out more? I would like to welcome Dr. Ashish Pradhan on our program today. Welcome, Dr. Ashish.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back, Monica.
Yeah, definitely. It's always a pleasure talking to you. So, Dr. Ashish, today we're talking about the seventh energy center in the saddle system, and we'd like to know how it is represented in the human body.
So, the seventh energy center is the most fascinating, obviously, the most complex. Uh, and it is very much a symbol, an anatomical, physiologic symbol of what spirituality is really all about, relative to the introduction that you just so eloquently made. So, as we have said from the very beginning of this series, that adopting a Cartesian frame of reference where we look at each individual energy center, although convenient, is not how the system functions. We have adopted this modality because that helps us to understand at a little more granular level, if you will. But the entire system is integrated, right from the first energy center right up to the seventh energy center, where what we are about to try to answer. So, within that framework, given the fact that all the energy centers are integrated, the limbic system, which is sort of the gross representation of the seventh energy center, is the epitome of an integral function. So, what is the limbic system? The limbic system is something that governs our actions and our behaviors. It is, one might say, one of the most uh, primitive form of neurological systems within the body. So, if you think about it, the limbic system sits deep inside our brain. Literally, if you think of our brain as a kind of a coconut, and if you start going inside the coconut, it is literally the core of it all, that comprises the limbic system, whereas the other layers kind of start developing outwardly. And if you look at the evolution of how this has come about, you find the correspondences of the limbic system as you go downward from, if we consider sort of the primate systems, the primate neurological systems of which the Homo sapien is a part, that is us. As you go downwards on the evolutionary scale, you can find there are aspects of the so-called limbic system. So the limbic system, in a way, might be referred to as a kind of a primitive brain, but it is anything but primitive. And the reason is, it comprises of multiple organs within the brain, or parts of the brain. To call it an organ is probably a misnomer. And we will talk about two or three of these in particular, but that probably might be the next question. But that is what it is. The limbic system is situated, it corresponds in the deep inside our brain, and it corresponds to the seventh energy center, and it serves as a kind of a major integrative aspect of our of the sensory inputs and the motor responses, that the body provides.
So, you just mentioned about different parts of the limbic system. Could you just elaborate a little bit more about that?
Sure, happy to. So basically, in the last episode, we spoke about the hypothalamus, which is related to the sixth energy center. But as we said just a few moments ago, that the whole thing is integrated. There are two or three other parts of the limbic system that I would briefly like to touch upon. The first one would be the amygdala. The amygdala, we have two amygdalae, so to speak, one in the left brain, another one in the right side of the brain. And these are small almond-shaped structures, they're part of the limbic system, of course, and they relate to our memories and our emotions. So, say for example, we see something that induces fear, or fear as a memory that is engraved in us is kind of a function of the amygdala. So, in people who have a hyperactive amygdala, they tend to be more fearful and so on and so forth. Post traumatic stress disorders, PTSD, is the numerous studies that seem to demonstrate a connection between that kind of a state and an overactive amygdala. So amygdala is again, as we said, a very important part of the limbic system because it processes our memories. It creates also what the fear factor, if you will, so on and so forth. The other structure that we would really also like to talk about is the hippocampus. Hippocampus is what is poetically described as a seahorse looking structure, and it relates to our memories. Hippocampus plays a very important role in our spatial memories, in memories that we form over a lifetime, but also it relates to our time and place sort of memories, so that's why it's kind of spatial memory, plays a very important role in that. The third structure I would like to talk about is the thalamus. The thalamus, which is, again we have two thalami, like we have two hippocampi. There are two of each one of these, one on either side of the brain, but they all sit together. The thalamus, you can think of this as a massive relay station. So all these sensory inputs of heat, cold, whatever the sensations that we feel in our body, they are brought up through the sensory nerves, and they then pass through the thalamus. The thalamus, you can say, is like a major networking junction. And from there, from the thalamus, the nerves then are projected out into other parts of the brain, particularly say the cerebral cortex or the temporal lobe, so on and so forth. And then based off of that, responses are created and they once again pass through the thalamus. So the thalamus acts as this kind of, again as we said, a relay center, and that's also part of the relay of the limbic system. So what I would now, and then we spoke about the hypothalamus in the previous episode, but just briefly, the hypothalamus again is a very important organ, very small, very important function by way of its endocrine functions, the way it controls the entirety of the autonomic nervous system by secreting and controlling hormones that govern our blood pressure, respiration, digestive system, so on and so forth. Now let's integrate it all together, and the pun is very much intended here. So through the thalamus, through the hippocampus, through the amygdala, through the hypothalamus, through the another part of the limbic system called as anterior cingulate gyrus, which is also responsible for judgments and behaviors. What you can see is that the limbic system essentially governs our vegetative functions. It is responsible for the state of being. This is not a spiritual description, this is literally a physiologic description. Who we are and how we exist in a second to second, minute to minute, temporal and spatial existence. So, say for example, I'm seated in a chair, I'm looking at a camera, I'm processing your words. Those words mean something to me because they are said in the English language, and so on and on. So that's where my cortex comes in, or the higher functions come in. But all of this I'm doing without having to think about my heart rate, my respiration, so on and so forth. So my state of being literally at this point in time is a function of the limbic system, and that is allowing me not to overreact, to underreact, to modulate my responses, not be fearful, keep my memories kick into place, so on, and millions of these processes that are happening without even me being aware of it. That in essence is your limbic system. That therefore this system is so critical to our functioning. It comprises various parts, but these all talk to each other, which is why we said if we just look at them as individual components, so here is the thalamus, here is the hypothalamus, here is the amygdala, here is the anterior cingulate gyrus, that doesn't help us to understand it. So modern neuroscience, although it still adopts this uh, breaking into its component parts kind of an approach. It still requires, from a neurological perspective, but also from a spiritual perspective, to understand how the whole thing works beautifully in sync to provide, to come up with the final result, that is us, functioning human beings.
All right. So this structure of the human brain, right? So how does it align with the interpretations or teachings of Sahaj?
So beautiful. That's a great question, Monica. So the teachings of Sri Mataji basically relate to realization or self-realization, to be very precise, of an individual, of what that true self is, what is the ultimate reality of one's own existence, one's own being. And this particular aspect is physiologically possible, and we'll deal with this maybe a little later. But how it aligns with the teachings of Sri Mataji is that the entirety of our spiritual system, as we have said repeatedly, is one integrated function. And it is through this limbic system, or at the level of the limbic system, is where it all comes together. Our actions and our emotions, our behaviors and our responses, our processing of what is around us, our upbringing, our conditionings, our affiliations, social, cultural, so-called religious, political, everything comes together and is processed at the limbic system level, and of course with the help of the higher centers, which is what allows us to do it. But that is where it all comes together vis-a-vis the alignment with Sri Mataji's teachings, so that we are one integrated, holistic being, rather than a kind of a mere sum of our components. So from the first energy center with its quality of innocence, the second energy center with its quality of, as we discussed, pure knowledge, if you will, third energy center sort of with its qualities of maintaining boundaries or maryadas or dharma, as the expression goes in the Sanskrit language, from the sense of security and love and compassion, to the feeling of collective consciousness, to the feeling of feeling relaxed about yourself and of others, having a forgiving disposition. All these energy centers, so to speak, that have those qualities are ultimately made possible or manifest because of the limbic system, because of the amygdala, because of the thalamus, because of the hypothalamus, because of the other components that we have not touched upon within the limbic system. So the limbic system allows us, if you will, to manifest the qualities of the energy centers through this magnificent evolutionary process that has brought us to this ultimate step, which is a breakthrough in our consciousness through self-realization. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely it's a breakthrough in the consciousness with the way that you've explained. And I think it was a very nice recap of all the previous topics that you've covered in this series about the different energy centers. And for those of you who have missed those episodes, we would encourage you to go back and watch them. And this being, the final episode, it just, brings me to the next question about something that you just mentioned towards the end of your previous response about the consciousness. So, what is human consciousness, and can it be influenced through internal or external means, and how does it relate to collective consciousness?
So that's a very profound question, and one has to approach it. So thanks for asking, first of all. Second, I would like to state very, very, very clearly, uh, one has to approach this with a very healthy dose of humility. Not that the previous things are not, do not require humility, but this one even more so, if ever there was a need. And the reason is that we still do not know from a neurology perspective, although enormous amount of effort has been expended on it. Consciousness sort of remains the final frontier. And what is consciousness as a function of neural correlates of our activity? In other words, if an individual is subjected to an imaging modality such as positron emission tomography or PET scanning, and you see what parts of the brain are activated as individuals are put through various different kinds of emotions, is one way to understand consciousness, if you will. But consciousness basically implies two things. One is internal consciousness, and the other one is external consciousness. So there is a duality there. What do we mean by internal consciousness? Internal consciousness is about who I am, what I am feeling, where am I, and my position in the universe around me. External consciousness is everything about that is external to me. So there is a clear dividing sort of line, if you will, that I know or I perceive or I am aware of, whichever verb applies, to what is self and what is non-self. What is within me that relates to me and something that does not relate to me. It affects me but is not me. Like for example, this camera is not me, but it is affecting me because it is recording me, right? Something like that. So consciousness essentially deals with these two compartments, and how we begin to process that information is a major part of the study in neurosciences. Now, so that's one part, the external and the what is me or self or I. So if I look myself in my image in a mirror, I am beginning to look at myself. I know what I look like because from my childhood I have been looking and sort of being aware of who I am, and that awareness parts is a very important part of my consciousness. One of the challenges in the study of neurosciences is that we are studying the organ with the help of the same organ, right? So say for example, if you are designing a laptop, you are not designing a laptop with the help of another laptop, you are designing a laptop with the help of your brain, right? Unfortunately with us, what is, when you study the brain, you are studying the organ with the help of the same organ. So we are studying the brain with the help of the human brain, because everything is human brain at the end of the day. So likewise, if I am seeing myself, my eyes are perceiving a reflection, that is me, but I am using my eyes to see me. If there is some other way to see me, that is, if I can remove myself from myself, then I will get a better picture of who I am. That is just kind of basically a logical extension, and this is where people like Rene Descartes, from the French philosopher, sort of struggled with. And he came up with this expression because he thought about this so much, cogito ergo sum, which is I think therefore I am. And it forms the entire basis of the notion of the dualism of consciousness. But that is what consciousness essentially is. There are multiple states of consciousness. You are aware, then sometimes you are asleep, you are working. There is a lot of research now being done on, or that we are aware of, called the default mode network. It's a lot that mindfulness deals with. What is the default mode network? It is basically the resting state. If you are just sitting, walking, not doing anything consciously, as we call it, that is your default mode network. You might say it is kind of the background thing that your brain exists in. As soon as you start changing your conscious effort from that to a focused action, to a concentrated action, you are writing something, writing an email, performing a task, thinking about something in very specific terms. So that shifts your focus from default mode network to a more conscious network, to a more conscious effort. That's a shift in consciousness. So consciousness is again a function that is both neurological or physiological, but probably is something much more than that. We are just aware of who we are as part of a society, part of a civilization. I come from an Indian background. I'm civilizationally aware of where I come from. That's also a part of consciousness, although that isn't me per se, but it's a part of who my collective memories are. So it's a long, complex sort of a topic, not easily answerable, but that is what consciousness is about. As far as the neural relates of consciousness are concerned, we might say that study is ongoing. There are parts of our brain that become active when we switch from what we said before, default mode network to an active network, and then back again. So that is also consciousness. But is there one holistic, simple definition from a neurological point of view of consciousness? It certainly doesn't exist for now, but probably we could say consciousness is something that is the ultimate outcome of the entirety of these 84, 85 billion neurons, the synapses within those neurons that measure in their trillions, this entire mathematically impossible to grasp function probably produces what we call colloquially as consciousness.
So, I know, Dr. Ashish, along this series, right, we've talked about several different parts of the nervous system, about the subtle system. We've also zoomed out to talk about evolutionary, meanings to these energy centers. But for the purposes of, having like an overarching message for our audiences, what would you like to say, like as a broad message, which kind of like ties in all the different pieces of information that we've brought forth for our audiences? And then maybe at the end, you can talk about, self realization and what is unique about it.
Sure. So thank you. That's a again a beautiful question. So what one would like to leave our audiences with is that neurology, neuroanatomy is still relatively in its infancy. Genomics and proteomics are trying to understand the differences and the what makes us different as individuals, also what makes us one as individuals. It's a very well known factoid that the difference between us and primates, our closest primates, is about 2% of DNA. So we share about sequence homology. If you look at the DNA molecule with orangutans, they have about 97.5 to 98% sequence homology with us. It's just a 2% variance, but that 2% variance potentially produces Einstein's and Shakespeare's, versus also unfortunately the not so wonderful members of our species, historically speaking, who have brought about great death and destruction. But what one tries to say is science is an eternal quest, at least for now. We don't have the answers, who we are, where do we come from a scientific point of view. Those answers are in the domain of spirituality, and we'll get to that in a minute. But that is what we would like to leave our viewers with, at least from my point of view. That this is a journey, science is on a journey, we are making tremendous strides, brilliant minds, lot of effort, and we are closer to finding the answers to a lot of questions. But what is beautiful is to see that what spirituality has always been teaching us. I would not use the word religion because that can get kind of contentious, but certainly the broad thread of what we have been told by the so-called wise teachings through different civilizations, there is convergence. There is convergence between those teachings, and there is conversion with science, and that is beautiful to see, that we are an integrated being, that we are one whole, and that we are a part of a larger reality, and that reality is also that sits within us. And again, I would bring it back to the limbic system. The limbic system is a great example of how everything kind of comes together and ties together. So that is what I would like to leave our viewers with. Genomics, again I would say proteomics, how the protein metabolome basically will show us how this untold number of proteins essentially define who we are and what we do. But then that brings us to the final question, which is probably the most important one of this series. What is self-realization? So self-realization through Sahaja and through the teachings of Sri Mataji and through the meditative practice that she has brought forth on as a way of humanity to experience, allows us at a physiologic level, I'm going to repeat that, at a physiologic level, through the tips of our fingers, we can feel the existence of a power, of an energy that surrounds us, in which we are bathed all the time, but we are just not aware of it. So, by triggering this inner energy within us, which resides in the os sacrum, which we dealt with in the first or the second episode, its ascent through the so-called energy centers within us, also called as chakras, and its ultimate sort of ultimate realization or breakthrough through the seventh energy center, which means its activation of the limbic system in some shape or form. We cannot define it physiologically yet. Just to be very clear, as we speak here on the 8th day of December of 2024, maybe in the future we might be, but today we don't know that. But when that event happens, when that limbic system is somehow triggered by this energy, we can feel this as a form of cool breeze blowing through and coming through the tips of our fingers. A physiological phenomenon like this cannot be explained by anything that we know of neuroanatomy or neurophysiology or even pharmacology so far. No drug, no therapy, no state is able to provide this kind of an experience. And when you get that experience, you can feel, as a practitioner, I can vouch for this as having practiced this for a fairly long time now, you get that sense of self. That last but one question that you asked, Monica, which is consciousness. What is consciousness? You can feel your true self. It cannot be described in words. I'm not going to waste any more time, yours or mine, trying to explain what that is. It is what it is. There's a beautiful expression in the Sanskrit language. It goes as Tat Tvam Asat, that which exists. That's it. There is no profounder explanation that is required, perhaps. It is a state that you experience, and that's a state you experience for yourself. Books have been written about it, poetry has been composed about it, paintings have tried to depict it. It doesn't work. But it is made very easy and spontaneous by Sri Mataji, by allowing us to experience this state within us and experiencing it physiologically. That is self-realization. And that is why we take the opportunity to proclaim literally as much as we can. Try to get this, because this is not about reading a book and forming an idea. This is not about listening to someone and forming a concept. This is about experiencing it for your own self through what resides within you. It is your power, it is your will, but it is also your own individual unique experience, which then magically or paradoxically leads you to an elevated state of consciousness. My personal belief, and I'll end with that, Monica, is self-realization is a kind of, physiologically speaking, a supralimbic state. So it's not even at the level of the limbic system. It's supralimbic. Why? Because when you are in that state, you kind of experience, even for those brief moments or for some hours, a state where you don't feel thirsty, you don't feel hungry, you don't feel the need for, the external things that you crave for. And as a doctor, as a researcher, I have explained it to myself that it can only be because those impulses that reside within the limbic system, that the limbic system tries to control, are probably satisfied and are managed, if you will. Now, manage is a big term. There is no physiologic explanation for that management, but they somehow seem to be managed. And I have seen this in group settings where people are sitting for hours together without kind of, feeling the need for food or for water or for any other those bodily physical comforts that one craves. It can only be described probably as some kind of a supralimbic state where the needs of the organism are somehow innately satisfied. And those words are important, that there is nothing external that is happening. Something is happening within them, and that is what Sahaj meditation is truly about. That is what at least I for myself believe is what is self-realization.
And I think definitely there are certain things which are beyond the mind, and as long as we accept that, we will always be learning and discovering more and more. And I do want to say, Dr. Ashish, that you have learned and practiced enough neurology and meditation both. You've had the intention to share that knowledge with the wider audiences, and you have put in the time and effort to get this message out. We have no words to thank you for this contribution to this body of knowledge. And we look forward to having yet another series with you sometime soon. But thanks again for your contribution, Doctor.
Thank you again. Very kind of you. Kind words. Happy to do so.
Thank you. And for our audiences, we do want to say that even though the series is coming to an end, this is not the end of the journey. This is just the beginning of it. And you can always continue to send in further questions through comments in each of the episodes, and we will do our best to bring the responses back to you, whichever way that we can. And we want you to stay on to follow the guided meditation video by the founder of this meditation, Sri Mataji Nirmala Devi, and do want to thank her for giving all of this knowledge and giving it for free to people who are now coming out and sharing it with broader humanity. Thanks once again for all of you for joining us on this series. Thank you very much.
When the Kundalini passes through the 5 centers, it enters into the area which we call as limbic area. This area is all surrounded by 1,000 nerves. And when these nerves get enlightened, they look like flames of Vibgyor colors, 7 colors, and very mildly, beautifully shining, emitting peace. Now the limbic area is connected to all the area of the brain and also to the nerves. So it starts flowing onto the nerves, giving you the new awareness of collective consciousness called as Samuhik Chetana. Keep your eyes closed. First of all, please put your right hand on your heart. All the time the left hand is towards me. Now, here you have to say, in your heart, with all sincerity, Mother, am I the spirit? Ask the question 3 times in your heart. This is a very fundamental question. Now bring the right hand on to the left hand side of your stomach, in the upper part. Here press it. Now this is the center of your mastery, your guidance, your Guru Tattva as they say. So ask a question, Mother, am I my own master? This is a question to be asked 3 times. Mother, am I my own master? Now, bring your right hand down below, in the lower part of the abdomen. Now, this is the center from which all the divine work is done. All the pure work is done. So to ask 6 times, because this center has got 6 petals. Mother, please give me pure knowledge. 6 times you just ask. As a result of this asking, the Kundalini starts getting awakened. Now to help the Kundalini rise, you have to cooperate with her. So please put your right hand on the left hand side in the upper part of your abdomen and press it on the stomach. Now here you have to say with full confidence, to help the Kundalini to rise, Mother, I am my own master. This you have to say 10 times. These are the 10 commandments which you have to say. That, Mother, I am my own master. Now, 10 times with full confidence. Now, please raise your right hand to your heart. Now, here you have to say, again with full confidence, Mother, I am the Spirit. This is the truth. You are the Spirit. But you have to say with full confidence, Mother, I am the Spirit. This you have to say 12 times. Now one has to know that God Almighty is the ocean of love. But above all, He is the ocean of forgiveness. So He forgives. Whatever wrong you do, He forgives. So don't feel guilty and put your right hand across on the left hand side in the corner which is made by your neck and your shoulder. Now here you have to say, again with full confidence, 16 times, Mother, I am not guilty. Please say it. Mother, I am not guilty. 16 times. I am not guilty at all. Please say it. Please say it. Now raise your hand across on your forehead. And it's a very important center. Here you have to say from your heart, Mother, I forgive everyone. Please say it from your heart. How many times is not the point. Mother, I forgive everyone. Now some would say that it's very difficult to forgive. But it's a myth that we do not forgive or we forgive. We do not do anything in both the cases. But if we don't forgive, then we play into wrong hands. So please say from your heart, Mother, I forgive everyone. Now please take your hand on the back agya, the same center, on the back side of your head and allow your head to rest on it and push it back a little bit. Now here, You have to say, for your satisfaction, because you always feel guilty, that, "O Divine, if I have done anything wrong, please forgive me." Please forgive me. From your heart. Stretch your hand fully and put your center of your palm on top of the fontanelle bone area, which was a very soft bone in your childhood. Press it hard. Press hard your scalp. Now you have to move it 7 times, saying one thing, which you have to ask for. Mother, please give us my self-realization, because I cannot force on you. So you have to ask for it. 7 times, press it hard and move it 7 times, very hard. Slowly, saying that.